let's quickly talk about the Jazz Clippers, the other series we have going in the West. This is the 1-4 matchup. And, this is another one where I guess in both cases here, we're kind of surprised in the West because we have the Jazz up 2-1. I had picked the Clippers in 6. Justin, I think you had echoed that same pick.
I think so.
So we're a little bit surprised because I think both you and I thought that Kawhi and Paul George, well, maybe mostly Kawhi, were going to rise to the occasion here. The home team still has not lost a game in this series, so still could very well be in line with our predictions, just taking a little longer to get there. But just to recap the games for you guys real quick. First game, very close, 112-109, Utah. This was a game that was very entertaining. Utah trailed in the first half and then was able to come back, had a monster third quarter where it was like 34-19 or something in that quarter split. And the Jazz come back and win that game, which really, to me, raised my eyebrows and made me start believing in the Jazz a little bit more. I've been, kind of clear that I wasn't a true believer in the Jazz even up until this point, up until maybe that game. Anyway, game 2, 117-111. This game was more balanced, and the Jazz led for nearly the entire game. A couple times, I think the Clippers passed them, but the Jazz led at halftime, and then they were able to hang on to that lead to the end of the game. Still another close game. Game 3, series goes to LA, and it's totally swapped. We see a monster performance from Paul George. We don't hear that a lot lately, at least in the past 2 years in the playoffs. He had 31. It was a playoff high for him, and the Clippers win 132-106. So game 4 is going to be played on Monday the 14th. I'll just ask you point blank, how do you see this playing out? Do you feel like you want to change that prediction that you had of the Clippers, or do you think it's just a matter of time and the Clippers are going to catch up and figure this out? Tough question.
Yeah, I'll stick with it. I think it's funny because it seems, I think in game 3 with Donovan Mitchell, he tweaked his ankle. So he's had injuries too.
He started the playoffs hurt.
So it's a situation if he's out for a long period of time, that's going to change everything. And Utah won't have any kind of a chance without Donovan Mitchell. I'll stick with my pick. I don't know. My analysis may be kind of very elementary, but I just feel with a lot of these teams, I can't just get a beat on them. Especially one thing with the Clippers, it just seems like unless they're desperate, that's when they play well. Mm-hmm. When there's really no, I don't know, each game has stakes, but when their back's up against the wall, that's when they just turn on the high gear. Mm-hmm. That's not a championship team to me. Mm-hmm. And that can lead them to just, losing on, very badly. So I don't know. On paper, the Clippers are just a more talented team, but just the way they play, it's very, loose from game to game. Mm-hmm. But again, I'll say the same thing with the Phoenix Suns. I'll make the same thing with the Utah Jazz. I mean, right now, if you look at Booker and you look at Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, I think, has been getting a lot of praise. I don't see tons of criticism of him. I think people have really, through his performances, it's weird because I think Donovan Mitchell's maybe performed just as much. I think that Booker's probably had more of those, bigger point performances maybe, mm-hmm. or maybe got more media spotlight. But Donovan Mitchell's right there with him. And it's a situation for both these guys, we're trying to, transition out of the Dwayne Wade, LeBron era, and move into this new era. And right now, we really do not know which guy is going to be that next heir apparent to us, that supreme champion. Some people say Giannis, but we know what's going on with the Bucks. Is it Durant? But he goes from team to team. He's not, I don't think a lot of hardcore NBA fans respect him. I think they respect his game, but in terms of being the leader of the sport, I don't think he's gotten that respect. So right now, it's kind of like it's wide open, basically, what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I have my reservations about this series. I will say, I think for the Clippers, I don't. Them losing the series, I think, is going to stick to them, especially what happened in the bubble. I think they're going to get immense criticism for this if they lose. I mean, it's a desperation series.
Mhm.
I think Utah, just because they're a smaller market, I think they'll get left off the hook, even though
they're younger than the Clippers.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So, with the Mavs series where the Clippers, went to the wire on that series, everyone was saying things are going to be blown up if they lose that series. Do you think the same thing still applies in this series here, even though they're one round further? Like Kawhi's out if they lose this series?
I would say so. I mean, what is this team supposed to be? A championship or bust, right? I mean, look at Stephen A. Smith always makes the comparison. He had some King jewelry in the car for that whatever stupid New Balance commercial. Look what he's done since then. Nothing. LeBron has a title, even though they got bounced this year or whatever. Him and Anthony Davis are champion. What have you done in LA? Nothing. Yeah. So I think for him, I just think with this team, they've underperformed with the talent that they've had, and especially where the Western Conference has been. I mean, it should be wide open, and they're struggling with these teams that are clearly inferior from a talent level.
Just to add, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said there. To add another component to this, I think there's a real possibility in this series that just like what happened in the first round, Kawhi might tighten up on Donovan Mitchell. Yeah. Like by the time we get to game 4, game 5, later in the series.
But why is he tightening up on him like later in the series? Right? I mean,
fair point.
If everybody's, he's the greatest player in the world. He's this, he's that. Like, shut him down. I mean, are you a two-way player or
just
not?
Get it done now.
I don't know why. It's just, I don't know. It's just kind of, this guy's what we think he is. Like, why is he waiting till later?
Yeah, maybe it's the load management.
Yeah.
No, fair point. I just wonder if there was kind of some sort of like emotional fatigue after that first round. I don't think that's a great excuse. That's not something that old school NBA players are going to be sympathetic about towards these guys.
That's true.
But I guess my point being, I could see a scenario where the Clippers do have another level they can go. Like maybe the Jazz were already kind of at 100% and primed going in for those first 2 really close games, whereas the Clippers maybe were a little more fatigued coming in with a longer series. And we see on the back end of this series, they really lock in. I mean, it's a bad thing to say about any team. You don't want to be a switch on, switch off team, like you said earlier. But I could see a scenario where the Clippers do that. I still feel like we said last year from their bubble disappointment last year. Like I still am not a full believer in this team, but also this Jazz team is so young that I still feel okay with our pick of Clippers in 6.
Sure.